Continue our discussion pertaining to respiratory system. So now, let's proceed to larynx cartilages, or let's say larynx bones. So what are those particular bones that actually serves as protection to the larynx? So what are those? Of course, we have a thyroid cartilages or your Adam's apple. We also have epiglottis. It covers larynx to the route of food. Then gluteus, we have vocal folds, which is the cords or the for sound. We have cricoid cartilages, and it actually attaches to the larynx to trachea. And we also have the last cartilages that pertaining or located in the larynx is the arytenoid cartilage or attached to vocal folds. So these are the cartilages or the main bones of larynx. Okay, if we literally explain what is thyroid cartilage, it's basically a flexible tissue that forms the front part of the larynx. So meaning to say, when we say larynx, it is the voice box. And epiglottis, we already discussed what is this. And let's proceed to gluteus. Gluteus is a part of epiglottis that is a vocal folds or a cords that basically produces what? Sounds. Okay? So, how about cricoid cartilage? Basically, the description of a rhincoid cartilage, that's why it's attaches to the larynx, because to the larynx and trachea, because it is a ring-shaped cartilage or a ring-shaped bone. So that is cricoid cartilage. And lastly, we have arytenoid cartilage. It usually attach your vocal folds. Your arytenoid cartilage is actually the reason why you have different vocal voices. Okay, so that is particularly on the bones of larynx. So these are the parts or division of the larynx. So now let's proceed to the framework of larynx. So as you can see, this is actually the illustration pertaining to the larynx and its parts. Okay, yeah. So now let's proceed to the voice production. So what are those voice production that we have? Number one is ventricular folds. This is the false folds, usually hold the breath against the thoracic air pressure. We have vocal cords. It is the true cords. Why? It usually vibrate to produce different frequency. And lastly, we have pharynx, mouth, sinuses, nose, tongue, lips. They usually alter the sound. So the reason why we have sound, or the reason why you have a voice box, because of this parts, or the reason why we have a voice or a sound through the words that we alter, because of this. We have pharynx, mouth, sinuses, nose, tongue, lips. And particularly to the both ventricular folds and vocal cords, this is usually pertaining or identifying if the cords is false or true. If ventricular, it is false cords. It is particularly on the thoracic part of air pressure. And when we say vocal cords, this is actually, it's also known as vibration. Okay, the vibrate produce what? Different frequency in your voice. That's why you also have different voices because of this. So this is the voice production, or these are the voice production for the larynx. Okay, so now let's proceed to knowing the illustration pertaining to this. We have here the base of tongue, epiglottis, false vocal cord. Oh, yan, makita niyo yan lahat. So that was be particularly on the location of different parts of the larynx or voice production of the larynx. Okay? Let's proceed to trachea. So trachea is basically a anterior part of the esophagus. It is usually a C-shaped cartilage along the esophagus. We have three parts or three major function of the trachea. We have carina. This is the ridge at the bifurcation to the bronchi, and we have intubation or tube down collapse to the trachea, and we also have tracheostomy or the hole in the trachea or the bypass of obstruction. Okay, as I've said a while ago pertaining to trachea, it is a windpipe. It is a key part of your respiratory system. When you breathe an air, it travels from your nose or mouth through your larynx. So that is your trachea. There are three major functions of the trachea. Number one, passage for air. Moisten and warm it while it passes into the lungs. And number three, it protects the respiratory surface it protects the respiratory surface from the accumulation of foreign particles or the microorganism that usually enters our body. So that is trachea. Okay? Carina is usually a base of the trachea that separates the opening of the right and left main bronchi. That's why here it is the ridge. Okay, the separation of the bronchi. So in intubation naman, it is particularly on the tube that collapses trachea. What is the purpose of having intubation? It's very important to know what is intubation, because this particular terms can help to save a life when someone can't breathe. So that is intubation, or the purpose of having intubation. Then if we're trying to figure out what is trichostomy, it is basically a hole in the trachea. It is an hole in your windpipe that usually provides alternative airway for breathing. So that is trachea. Okay? So now let's proceed to another term pertaining to the part of trachea. In trachea, we also have mucosa. When we say mucosa, it is pertaining to the membrane lining or membrane lining surface. So when we say mucosa, it's made up of goblet cells and ciliated epithelium. We already know what is ciliated, meaning to say it is a hair-like structure of membrane or a tissue. Submucosa is a connective tissue, meaning to say when we say connective tissue, it is much more particularly on the protection of the mucosa. It usually in the deep to the mucosa because it is the protection or supports in the mucosa. Then lastly, we have adventitia. It is an outermost layer made of C-shaped rings of hyaline cartilage. What is hyaline cartilage? Okay, when we say hyaline cartilage, it's particularly on helping your bones move smoothly past each other to your joints. So basically, when we say hyaline cartilage, that particularly on adventitia, it is the reason why your bones can move freely. So that is pertaining to adventitia. When we say mucosa, it is a ciliated epithelium. It made up of goblet cells. It is particularly on membrane lining surface. And when we say submucosa, it is a connective tissue pertaining to support and protection in the mucosa. And adventitia, it is an outermost layer made of C-shaped rings of hyaline cartilage. When we say hyaline cartilage, it is the reason why your bone can move freely in the trachea. Okay? Let's move forward. So this is basically the illustration pertaining to the part or the organ trachea. Okay?
Okay, hello.
Then next, we
tayo
have
sa presentation.
bronchi.
Again, 6 minutes.
So basically, in bronchi, we have this particular function. We have air reaching the bronchi. We have warm and cleanse of impurities saturated with water vapor. Bronchi is subdivided into secondary bronchi, or each supplying a lobe of the lungs. Its air passage undergo 23 orders of branching in the lungs. So as I've said a while ago, we have primary and secondary bronchi. When we say bronchi, this is actually a passageway on how air usually transport to different parts of the respiration than through the bronchi. When we say warm and cleanse of impurities in the bronchi, meaning to say the air that been transport through your nose, it's already been cleansed and impure or purity. It has a purity. And it is saturated with water vapor because it is already been filtered. Okay? So that is bronchi. So what is the main function of bronchi? So bronchi basically is a connection or the large tubes that connect to the trachea or the windpipe and direct the air you breathe to your right and left lungs. So that is the major location of the bronchi. It is a large tube connecting your windpipe. What is your windpipe? Your trachea. Okay? Trachea also is the main airways of your oxygen. Next, we also have a conducting zone of bronchial tree. So what are those? So as we all know, that respiratory system or respiration consists of two main zones. We have conducting zone and respiratory zone. Okay. When we say conducting zone bronchial 3, it has the tissue walls of bronchial that form in the trachea. It usually conducting tubes. The conducting tubes usually become smaller. Then the structural changes occur pertaining to the cartilage support structure, the epithelium types, and the amount of smooth muscle increases. So meaning to say, the zone in the bronchial 3 already been changed, and the changes of it is pertaining to the cartilage, the epithelium, and amount of smooth muscle. Okay? So, the structure pertaining to cartilage is changed, the epithelium types is also changed, and the amount of smooth muscle is increases. This is particularly on the bronchial tree. What is this bronchial tree ba? When we say bronchial tree, it is basically the multiple branch of the bronchi. So, as I've said, we have primary and secondary bronchi. Okay? So, that is pertaining on the zone, in the conducting zone pertaining to the bronchial tree. So now we have bronchioles. Bronchioles is consists of cuboidal epithelium. It have a complete layer of circular smooth muscle, but it lacks cartilage support and mucus producing cells. So bronchioles is usually the tiny branch of the air tubes in your lungs, and it usually carry air to small sacs in your lungs. It is called alveoli. So that is particularly on the main function of bronchioles. And bronchioles is usually known as the smaller branches of the bronchial airway. So as I've said a while ago, it is an airways in the lower tract of respiratory. So that is bronchioles. Next, we have respiratory zone pertaining to the bronchioles pa rin, or bronchi. It defines the presence of alveoli. When we say alveoli nga, it is a small sacs in your lungs. It begins at terminal of bronchioles, feed into respiratory bronchioles. Respiratory bronchioles lead to alveolar ducts, then to terminal cluster of alveolar sacs composed of alveoli. It has approximately 300 million alveoli, account for most of the lungs volume, or provide a tremendous surface area for gas exchange. So what is in this, or how to explain respiratory zone pertaining to the bronchi? So what happened to the respiratory zone if we'll literally discuss it in the bronchi? So usually the respiratory zone extend from terminal bronchioles, or the upper part of the bronchial tree, with small cuboidal bronchial cells. It is usually lead into alveolar structure that are composed of alveolar type. Okay, or alveoli type cell. So meaning, if we're trying to figure out the respiratory zone to conducting zone, the respiratory zone is in the top or terminal of the bronchioles, while the conducting zone, it is the last part in the terminal bronchioles. Okay, last part si conducting ha. So that is basically the difference between respiratory zone and conducting zone. So let's proceed like this. So this is the part of the respiratory zone in the bronchioles. Okay?
Sa kanilang mga
yan, another illustration. We have this.
Layunin nito
Okay.
magbigay ng
So now
impormasyon
let's
at
proceed to the
gabay
lungs.
sa
So as
mga
I've said in my
mananaliksik,
previous
magulang,
discussion about the lungs, or in the introductory portion about the lungs has there are two types or two part of your lungs. It is not a twin because it is not identical. The both part of the lungs has right and left lung. So here in the lungs, as I've said, it's already been discussed a while ago in the introductory part. We have cardiac notch. This is an indentation or identification, or a space that accommodates by the heart. We have left lung. It's separated by upper and lower lobes because it only consists of two layers, and it is called as an oblique fissure. And we have the right lung. It's separated into three lobes. It is superior, middle, and inferior, and it is called oblique and horizontal fissure. So I've already discussed that one in the first slide. Okay, let's move. So this is the example of the lung. So as you can see, this is the right portion. We have 1, 2, 3. We have the superior lobe, middle lobe, and inferior lobe. We have the left lobe. We have the inferior lobe and the superior lobe because it's only two parts. Okay. Then, next, we have the pleurae. Okay, or pleura. Pleura is a thin, double-layered serosa. What do you mean by serosa? Serosa is actually a serous membrane, a smooth serous membrane. It is an outer lining of organs and body cavities of the abdomen, chest, or including the stomach. So as we know that digestion and respiratory system is somewhat related to one another. So we have two parts of pleura. We have parietal pleura and vesical pleura. We've already discussed this one in the previous discussion. Parietal is all about the thoracic wall or covers thoracic wall. It is around the heart and between the lungs. When we say visceral, it is external lung surface, and it divided into two: the central mediastinum, or the location of the heart, and the two lateral components, which is containing a lung. So that is pertaining to pleura. Pleura is a serosa or a serous membrane, meaning to say it is an outer lining surface of your respiration or respiratory system. Okay? So I think I've already done my discussion pertaining to respiratory system. So I hope you will watch it, because tomorrow we will be having an oral recitation. If there's no more question clarification, thank you so much and have a nice day.